John Bolton is the former Bush administration ambassador to the United Nations. And back then, the liberal elites and Democrats in Washington, D.C. couldn't stand the guy. They thought that he was a warmonger and that he was a liar and he was deceitful and he was conceited and he was arrogant. And then Trump became president. And for a few months, Bolton became Trump's national security advisor until Trump fired him. And now those same people love John Bolton. But John Bolton just had a visit by the FBI this morning at his front door. And based on one legal analyst's opinion, he could be in deep, deep trouble. First, let's turn to CNN, where they were acting like they were covering a funeral over there. Here's how they reported the early morning raid.
We're following major breaking news this morning that continues to unfold. The FBI conducting a court-authorized search at the home of John Bolton as part of a national security investigation. That is according to a source familiar with the matter. A ton of questions around this right now. Our CNN crew has been on the ground, on the scene this morning, observed FBI personnel near Bolton's home, even seeing personnel go into his home. John Bolton, as you well know, is President Trump's former national security advisor and a former U.S. ambassador to the UN. In recent years, he has become a prominent critic of the president ever since he left the first Trump administration. As recently as this week, he spoke to us about President Trump's meeting with Vladimir Putin.
Well, I think it's a reflection of just how confident the Russians feel. They have escaped the sanctions that have been threatened by President Trump. They've heard Secretary of State Rubio say on Sunday, we're not going to sanction them because it will cause diplomatic efforts to fail. And they are trying to keep the table set so that things work out in their direction.
That was just a couple days ago. CNN's Caitlin Polans joining us now. Caitlin, you brought us this breaking news and you have some new reporting already. What's going on?
That's right, Kate. We can confirm, according to a person familiar with this investigation, that the probe, it's related to the possible retention of national security information. So a little bit more specific on what we know about this investigation, this search that the FBI is conducting of John Bolton's home. Not only is it about national security, it is about the retention of national security information. Often, Kate, that looks like, are there classified documents being kept outside of where they should be kept? That often is what we see in investigations like this, but we're still waiting to hear more of what this is. The FBI, they are at work still on that scene in Maryland where John Bolton's home is. They took bags out of their vehicles to bring inside. There were 4 or 6 agents. They have those blazers on that say FBI in the back. So this is quite an observable scene right now, very different than when the retention of national security information was being investigated during a search of Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago property 3 years ago.
Wait, I'm sorry. How is this different exactly? They were wearing FBI windbreakers then, and then it was before sunrise with sirens everywhere. And no, you didn't see all of the activities at the home of President Trump because it's Mar-a-Lago. It's behind gates and walls and guards, but there was plenty of show of force that morning. What the hell are you talking about? This, by the way, is easy to see from the street because he lives in Bethesda, Maryland, which is a city that borders Washington, D.C. It's where a lot of rich, howdy-towdy liberals live. Not that John Bolton's a liberal, but he's part of the establishment, that's for sure. Yes, this does have to do, apparently, with classified documents. We're going to get into the comparison of how the FBI treated John Bolton this morning versus how they treated Donald Trump, since our young lady at CNN raised that issue, and also how they treated Joe Biden's retention of classified documents, you'll remember. One other thing about John Bolton, the nuclear walrus, he was never president of the United States. I just want to make sure you recognize that, because the rules are different for a president, a former president with documents coming from his own administration and his own White House that he has, versus the former national security advisor or a former ambassador to the United Nations retaining classified documents. One other thing, John Bolton is a political figure. He's not just a foreign policy expert. He's not just a national security expert, like they try to refer to him as. He is a political figure. In 2015, he formed an exploratory committee to run for president of the United States. He decided not to enter the race because it was such a crowded field. But you'll remember that was the same race that Donald Trump decided to enter, and he won. So understand that about John Bolton. He's not just some guy who's worked as a political opponent. No. He is a political figure, and at one point flirted with the idea of vying for the presidency against Donald Trump. Just remember that as we continue to see how this story unfolds. Oh, one other thing. Did you notice she's very frustrated? She said, all we know is what we've heard about, that this has something to do with national security. But other than that, we have not heard anything else from the FBI. She's like flustered and frustrated that they're not leaking to her like they always did under Christopher Wray and James Comey. Did you catch that tone in her voice? Other than that, we really don't know what else is happening here. We haven't heard a thing. We're just going to have to wait. Yes, that's how criminal investigations are supposed to happen, ma'am. All right, a little bit more here from CNN, and then we'll move on.
John Bolton, he has not been charged with anything here. He's not been in government for 6 years. He did write a book and was under investigation soon after he left the Trump administration in 2020. He was being investigated at that time by a federal grand jury in Washington on the possible disclosure of classified information in that book, and he was not charged there. So looking at the possibility of a through line, it seems to be more likely, given that this is about the retention of national security information. There hasn't been a formal comment yet that we have received from John Bolton or from his lawyer. He was unaware of the FBI activity this morning. He wasn't home at the time. And we also are waiting to see if the administration will say anything publicly. So far, some cryptic messages posted on social media by the two top officials at the FBI. Kash Patel, the FBI director, on the platform X, writing, "No one is of the law FBI agents on mission." That was right after 7 a.m. this morning. And then the deputy FBI director, Dan Bongino, posting, "Public corruption will not be tolerated," not mentioning John Bolton by name in either of those things. This is a situation that would be court authorized. So the FBI would have gone to a court with the help of Justice Department prosecutors asking to have the approval of a search like this take place. They would have had to have probable cause to do this. But that, as we know, is a far, far long way from potential charges and also potential trial, anything like that.
Something tells me that they covered the raid on Mar-a-Lago a little differently than they're covering this story. Oh, they're so predictable and so tedious. Let me fill in some blanks here. You heard her allude to an investigation where a grand jury was impaneled in 2020 investigating John Bolton based on revealing classified information and potentially retaining classified documents back then with regard to his memoir called In the Room Where It Happens, or I think The Room Where It Happens. And it was about his time in the Trump administration as his national security advisor. Now, the book is like this thick, okay? But his time serving Donald Trump was really more a little like this. Not that size matters or anything, but come on, man. And frankly, naming a book, a personal memoir about your time working in the White House, naming that after a song from Hamilton, I mean, I'm sorry, that should make you face federal charges right there, in my opinion. But understand something. Under Attorney General Bill Barr, a grand jury was impaneled and they were investigating John Bolton's criminal use of classified documents and leaks of national security information. Then Director of National Intelligence John Ratcliffe, who is now the CIA director, participated in that investigation and believed that John Bolton did in fact violate the law having to do with national security secrets and classified documents, mishandling thereof. You just heard the CNN reporter say that no charges were filed. Let me complete that statement for you because although it is accurate, it is incomplete. The investigation was still open and ongoing when the new president came into office in January of 2021. His name was Joe Biden. And then the investigation was halted. No resolution, no exoneration, no dropping of charges. There were no charges brought. They just stopped investigating. Don't look over there. Stop looking over there. We have more important things to do. January 6th. So, in my opinion, what we're seeing right now is the resumption of the investigation that had begun in 2020. I could be wrong. We'll see. Unlike other people, I'm not going to sit here and tell you what I don't know. I'm just going to tell you the facts and fill in what she left out. You did hear a lot on cable news this morning and on broadcast news, as their hair was on fire, that this investigation was going on, that this was because Donald Trump ordered this raid on John Bolton as punishment and retribution because John Bolton has been critical of Donald Trump. That's what you heard everywhere, without any evidence, without any facts. Clearly, Donald Trump has ordered this. This man is being investigated because Donald Trump doesn't like him. That's what's happening here. Well, I can understand them jumping to that conclusion because that's what we saw for 4 years under Joe Biden. And it's certainly what we saw with the lawfare that was employed against Donald Trump and anyone who worked for Donald Trump or liked Donald Trump and supported Donald Trump under Barack Obama or the regime of James Comey, James Clapper, and John Brennan. I get why you would jump to that conclusion. But here's Donald Trump addressing the issue head on.
No, I don't know about it. I saw it on television this morning. I'm not a fan of John Bolton. He's a real sort of a lowlife. When I hired him, he served a good purpose because, as you know, he was one of the people that forced Bush to do the ridiculous bombings in the Middle East. Bolton, he wants to always kill people, and he's very bad at what he does. But he worked out great for me because every time he doesn't talk, he's like a very quiet person, except on television. If he could say something bad about Trump, he'll always do that. But he really doesn't talk. He's quiet. And I'd walk into a room with him with a foreign country, and the foreign country would give me everything because they said, "Oh no, they're going to get blown up because John Bolton's there." He's not a smart guy, but he could be a very unpatriotic guy. I mean, we're going to find out. I know nothing about it. I just saw it this morning. They did a raid.
Do you expect the DOJ to brief you on this?
Yeah, they'll brief me probably today sometime.
And the foreign minister.
I tell Pam and I tell the group, I don't want to know, but just you have to do what you have to do. I don't want to know about it. It's not necessary. I could know about it. I could be the one starting it. I'm actually the chief law enforcement officer, but I feel that it's better this way.
All right. So there's President Trump saying he didn't know anything about it, but he, well, as you saw, has no great fondness for John Bolton. Now, let's turn to Fox News coverage where they have George Washington University law professor Jonathan Turley, who knows the law backwards and forwards. And if you have paid attention to Jonathan Turley over the years, you know that when it comes to lawfare employed against Trump or people within the Trump universe, he's been dead on right about everything. Like yesterday, Letitia James' ridiculous $500 million fine against Donald Trump for the outrageous trumped up real estate mortgage fraud allegations that they dragged up into the court to try to harm Donald Trump and keep him from running for office. That got thrown out by an appellate court in New York. They were embarrassed about how outrageous it was. And Jonathan Turley told you that would happen. He is spot on about this stuff and really knows the law. And by the way, he's not serving opium up to you and shooting it into your veins. He'll sometimes say, yeah, I think Trump might be in trouble with this thing or not or whatever. Well, let's see what Jonathan Turley thinks about these charges against John Bolton, or at least the suggestion that there are crimes here with regard to the retention of classified documents and specifically documents having to do with national security implications. Jonathan Turley, what does this mean for John Bolton?
It is intriguing here because these are long-standing allegations that the book indicated or referenced classified material that he may have acquired when he was in the administration. We're not clear as to what that is, but it would suggest that it could be national defense information. The reason that's important is that creates a heightened potential penalty. So you can have penalties that range from 5 to 20 years. 20 years tends to be the sentences for concealing information, obstructing justice. Simply having classified information can weigh in at about 10 years. And there are often multiple counts because each of those documents can be charged separately. So there is a strange history here. So you had these allegations coming out as early as the first Trump administration. Then there was an allegation that the Biden administration essentially scuttled a further look at this case. Right. And now we have this new development. But we really don't know if there's something that has occurred most recently, whether they uncovered something that they believe is sort of evergreen, that this is still a viable criminal case.
All right, so let me translate that for you. As he said, what the potential penalties might be if, in fact, any document retentions had anything to do with national security. It's like, what did he say, up to 20 years or 30 years? He's in deep if, in fact, they found those documents. And again, the eyewitness report suggests that the FBI was leaving the premises with bags of documents, or, well, we assume they're documents. But yeah, he's probably in deep. How deep? Well, right up to his mustache. That's how deep. It's not good. Also, by the way, we're hearing more from sources close to the investigation. This one by way of our friend Vince Colonnese. I'm sure you know him. We share the same radio station together in Washington, D.C. He replaced Dan Bongino when Dan Bongino went to the FBI as the deputy director, or co-deputy director, I guess now. Vince took his place on his podcast on his show. And he says, breaking from a source familiar with this morning's raid on Bolton's home. Wonder who that source might be. Did I mention that he replaced Dan Bongino to the... I did, right? I did? No, okay. Anyway, a source familiar with this morning's raid. This is related to a national security investigation of Mr. Bolton that was shut down by the Biden administration for political reasons. It involves stealing classified documents and weaponizing them for political purposes. Kash Patel and Dan Bongino have reopened the investigation, hence this morning's raid. Source says Bolton was not detained, but he's fully expected to be charged. That's kind of a thing, isn't it? By the way, I saw somebody mention this in the chat when we started. Yes, that's George Conway. George Conway, who used to be married to Kellyanne Conway, the political genius that won Trump his first term in office, and now a Lincoln Project toady anti-Trump hater, MSNBC dude. That's George Conway live streaming the raid on John Bolton's home. Now, I saw somebody speculate that either George Conway was tipped off or he potentially is John Bolton's gay lover. Don't know for sure either way about either of those two things, although I'm somewhat skeptical of the second. I will tell you this, though. It's Bethesda, dude. This is where these people live. Bethesda, Maryland. He probably lives like down the street or around the block. They're all neighbors. They're all, their kids all go to the same private schools and they all play soccer together. And that's why they're all friends, by the way. Media people, political people, FBI people, they all know each other. They all protect each other. They're all part of the blob in this town. All right. So quickly over back to CNN. They decided to get a reaction from Scott Jennings, and it's rather amusing.
Scott, I mean, what do you see here?
Well, I'm reminded of something that I heard someone say after the Mar-a-Lago raid. And the statement was, everybody ought to just calm down, whether you're pro-Trump or anti-Trump, and let the process work its way through. That was said by John Bolton himself after the Mar-a-Lago raid on Trump. Look, I try not to engage too much in conjecture on these things. All we really know is what Caitlin just told us, that this is related to an investigation regarding information he put in his book. We know that they're searching for things, and that's it. That's what we know. And so Ambassador Bolton's previous views on this were that processes should be allowed to work their way through. I assume this one will work its way through. And if he has not disclosed any classified information, that will be fine and good. And we'll talk about that. And if he has, I'm sure we'll talk about it as
Scott.
Yeah, that's a very keen observation and incredibly factual from our buddy and colleague Scott Jennings, because here's John Bolton saying exactly that after the Mar-a-Lago raid.
And I think it's important that everybody take a deep breath here. This is a very serious matter. And it would be better if we could let the legal process play out. I know that may be frustrating to some people, but the seriousness of it itself dictates that we try and proceed in the most orderly way we can.
Yeah, dictate. Absolutely. And we did let the legal process play out, and it did play out. As you know, the Supreme Court knocked down the charges that they were trying to bring against him, and the judge down in Florida knocked down the special counsel's investigation into the retention of classified documents, and eventually all charges were dropped. Do you know why the charges were dropped? Well, two big reasons. The first is Donald Trump won the election. The American people knew all about what the FBI did. We knew all about how they staged the photographs with the little red top secret folders over documents that weren't there before. They brought them to Mar-a-Lago and put them over the documents. We know what the FBI did. We know what the Justice Department did. We know what Biden did. We knew all of it. And the American people voted for Donald Trump anyway. The charges were dropped also because the rules are different when you're the president of the United States and you're retaining documents from your administration, whether it's for writing your memoirs, whether it's for your personal references. You work with the presidential archives. There's a complete law that covers the documents and the papers that you're keeping. And we knew that the Trump administration was working with the archives when all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the FBI raids his home. And there were anonymous leaks, and there were people saying that he had nuclear secrets that he was selling to the Saudis or the Iranians and all of that bullshit. And none of it was true. But because he was president of the United States, who, by the way, has the sole top power, no one can veto him over what is a classified document and what is not a classified document, to bring charges against a former president just a year out of office that he is in some way holding on to documents that he shouldn't have when he was the man who had the power to declassify anything he wanted, was ridiculous. And by the way, you're right, Ambassador Bolton, the legal system played out and Trump was exonerated and he was elected president. The legal process also played out against a former senator and former vice president who had classified documents in his home, not in his office, behind lock and key with constant security, like Donald Trump did at Mar-a-Lago. No. They were in a ratty old cardboard box next to his old Corvette in his garage where his crackhead son used to hang out. You know, the crackhead son that did business with foreign entities and made tens of millions of dollars from our adversaries overseas. And hey, look, here's a box of classified documents and national security secrets that dad brought home. Yeah, that guy's name is Biden. And there was an investigation into his classified documents. And you know that the U.S. attorney, Mr. Hur, decided not to bring charges against him. Not because he didn't break the law. Oh, no. He did break the law. And they could have brought charges, but he was so senile and feeble and couldn't even remember when his son died that the U.S. attorney decided not to bring the charges because no jury would actually convict him because they would feel sorry for him. Now, that's one special case with Joe Biden where he was treated very differently than former President Donald Trump. And now that brings us to John Bolton, who I want to remind you was never president of the United States and had no legal right to hold any classified documents, certainly classified documents that hold national security interests. So we shall see how this plays out. But my understanding is that holding on to top secret classified documents with national security implications is an incredibly super duper serious thing. Do you know how I know that? Because this guy told me.
Given moment. But I don't think he cared about the classification system. I don't think he appreciated the sensitivity of this information, and he didn't appreciate the sensitivity of how it was often acquired, the so-called sources and methods. So this had been briefed to him before I arrived. It was repeated frequently. I think it simply had no impact on him whatever.
There's a couple of different ways that people think about this, and people who are not friendly to the president who think about what's happened here. And one of them is, Donald Trump, master thief, criminal, running some kind of elaborate conspiracy to bring things out of the White House and keep them secret for potentially for political or financial gain. There are other people who attitude is Trump is chaotic. He's careless. He's not that smart. He took these things almost by mistake, and now he's basically stamping his feet and saying they're mine. I don't want to give them up. Give me a sense of where you think the truth lies with respect to Trump's intelligence, carelessness, and the degree to which he might have brought motive to bear on taking these documents out of the White House and keeping them for this long at Mar-a-Lago.
Well, it's very hard to speculate on motive other than that he liked cool things. He saw things so he wanted to take them, and he was pretty much able to take them, and not just on classified information matters, on all kinds of things that crossed his desk. Some days he liked to eat a lot of French fries. Some days he took classified documents. He wanted them. Why did he want them? Because he could get them.
Wow. Yeah, it's really hard to speculate things, but let me tell you the most insulting, despicable speculation I can give you just to make the former president look like a clown. You know, that's one approach. Or you could actually say, well, the president's team said, first of all, they had every right to have these documents, and many of them have been declassified. But in reality, just like any other president leaving the White House after their presidency, there were boxes and boxes of documents. They were all sent to his home, and then they were going through them, and they were working with the archive about which ones they could retain for their books or their memoirs and which ones would go back to the presidential archive, which is exactly what the president said at the time. But of course, no, we've got to talk about eating French fries because we're John Bolton. Well, that was just a one-off. Maybe John had a bad day. Were there any other times he talked about Trump having classified documents?
Joining me now is another member of the Trump administration who's speaking out against his former boss, former National Security Advisor, Ambassador John Bolton. I wanted to start. The New York Times has been reporting that former President Trump was obsessed with these classified documents, and aides described these documents as his beautiful mind materials. Is that consistent with what you saw when you were his National Security Advisor? And was there any one particular document that stuck out to you that he was obsessed with?
Well, I think he was kind of a collector of things that he thought were of interest to him for some reason or another. Clippings, mementos, classified documents. And it was very disturbing. We could see in the course of meetings with him, intelligence briefings, decision meetings, that sometimes he liked to retain things, and it became the practice just to make sure that we got them back in as many cases as we could. Obviously, we failed in many cases, but
there you go. Well, again, John Bolton's on a roll there. I know that he's got strong opinions about Donald Trump having classified documents. He's right out there, tip of the spear, just yapping about it all the time. But I'm sure there weren't any other instances of John Bolton thumping his chest about how important it is that somebody shouldn't have classified documents, right? I doubt he did any more of that.
Just wonder, as someone who worked inside the West Wing when Donald Trump was president, what is it like for you to see his mugshot tonight?
Well, I thought it was, as with most things Trump does, carefully staged. They must have thought about what look they wanted. He could have smiled. He could have looked benign. Instead, he looks like a thug. And I think it's intended to be a sign of intimidation against the prosecutors and judges. That's what they picked, and we'll see that picture everywhere.
So you think they actually spent time deciding, should he smile in this? Should he have this scowl that he appears to have gone with?
Almost as much time as they spent combing his hair.
He posted the mugshot, shortly after on his own social media account, along with the phrase "never surrender." I mean, a bit ironic given he had actually just surrendered at the Fulton County Jail behind me. But how do you expect him to try to use this to his political advantage as he's running for president?
Well, I think in the same way he's used the other three indictments, and I think the evidence is that the indictments have proven the law of diminishing marginal utility. If anything, they're not undercutting his support; they're building it up.
Yeah, well, he got that right. You got to hand it to him. I love these flashback moments, don't you? Listen, early on in this story, all we know is that the FBI went into his home and his office, got a bunch of documents, and now, if we believe the source close to Vince Coglianese from earlier today, they expect to charge him. When you see what he had to say about Donald Trump and the mugshot and being arrested and his use of classified documents and retention thereof, it's hard not to reach the conclusion that, in fact, karma is a bitch. Or, if I can give you the clean version, karma's a Joy Behar, if you know what I mean. Let's finish this examination with some, I think, sober and intelligent words from our friend Hugh Hewitt, who is part of the Salem Radio Network and Salem Media, and also an attorney in good standing. and former attorney with the Reagan administration's Justice Department. He said, Ambassador Bolton is best known as a hawk's hawk. President Trump discussed the utility of that reputation this morning. You saw that video. But Bolton is also a very, very experienced lawyer. He headed the civil division of the DOJ at the end of the Reagan era. He's also a prolific note taker, as his memoir of his UN years makes plain. I've been friendly with the ambassador for a couple of decades, frequent guest on air, and acquaintance off. I can't imagine he has classified documents at his home. But as the Biden garage showed, hubris can lead longtime senior officials to mistakes on documents. That said, the optics are so bad for Director Patel and AG Bondi if there is nothing there. The president strongly asserted that he had no knowledge of the search, and they'd really have to be certain of what they think they will find, whether classified documents or evidence of FARA violations. FARA violations is if you're doing business for a foreign government as a lobbyist or trying to influence policy or policy makers on behalf of a foreign government, you need to legally register as a representative of that foreign government. If it turns out that you've got income from a foreign government for doing such activities and you never registered, that's a violation. The best approach for commentators to note is that the ambassador has a long record of public service. That's true. He's a superb lawyer. I don't know. And that he has cleared many full field bureau background investigations, including no doubt an update prior to his becoming National Security Advisor to 45 in April of 2018, that the AG and director have as much at stake here as the former NSA, and that POTUS is not the moving force behind the warrant. That's all. That's all anyone knows until the warrant is public. I agree with most of that. I think that he's a very generous, kind-hearted man, and he's being more generous to John Bolton than I probably would be, although I've met him and have known him as well on and off, although I don't think we've spoken since 2018. But I will tell you this. Everything he just said is absolutely accurate. If they've got nothing on John Bolton, this will make Kash Patel, Dan Bongino, and Attorney General Pam Bondi look really, really bad. That suggests to me that they knew exactly what they were going to find when they did this raid, and they have all their ducks in a row. They would not have done something like this with this high a profile unless they actually knew where this was headed. So keep your eye on it. And also, I think the other most important thing that Hugh just pointed out is that the president has asserted and repeated that he did not direct this to happen. Other than that, we're just going to have to wait and see. But if I were John Bolton, I would be starting a GoFundMe right now for his legal defense. And I suspect he is.